I'm Kristen Kiomall Evans, creator of 12 of Magic and Muses, and you're listening to the True North Country Comics Podcast.
Welcome to a special edition of the True North Country Comics Podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book creators and supporters. It's May 11th, 2021. I'm John Swinimer. If you want to drop me a line, you can contact me at john@truenorthcountrycomics.com. These podcasts are published to celebrate the exhibitors of this year's virtual edition of the Toronto Comic Arts Festival. TCAF is an annual event gathering comic book creators from around the world to promote broad and diverse voices towards the betterment of the medium of comics through panels, keynote exclusives, and just basically enjoying the fun of comics. On this episode, I chat with Kristen Kiomall Evans about 12 of Magic and Muses at TCAF 2021. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. It's also available on the True North Country Comics channel on YouTube. I invite you to like and subscribe. Based in Ontario, Kristen has been making comics since 2009 and has been self-publishing her own work since 2015. She's been working as a solo force as a writer, artist, letterer, and publisher, as well as a web developer and marketer. Additionally, Kristen has studied animation. She's also a member of the Spider Forest Comic Collective. Kristen's recent published work is 12 of Magic and Muses, for which she received nominations from Sequential Magazine for Best Graphic Novel and Best Writer. And so, without further ado, here's my chat with Kristen Kiomall Evans about 12 of Magic and Muses at TCAF 2021. So, Kristen Kiomall Evans, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
Thank you for giving the opportunity.
Appreciate your time. What I normally do to start off the interview is ask the creator about their first comic book. So I wonder if you remember, what was the first comic book that you read?
This is actually really hard to answer because I think the first comics that I read next to like Bazooka Joe out of the candy was probably Archie, because he was available at the grocery store, so you could always be like, "Oh, Mom, can I get something from the grocery store?" And she'd be like, "Well, I want you to read, so I'll get you a comic."
I think that's why they put it there.
Yeah, it was a good strategy.
Oh, yeah, very popular, that's for sure. So, yeah, a lot of people do reference Archie as one of their first, that's for sure. But I'm wondering, who influences your work today? Who are you reading today?
Well, that's the funny part about it, because while Archie was my first exposure to comics, I was such the 2000 manga kid. So, like, as soon as, this big new thing, anime, showed up in my life, it was like, oh, I can find it in book form. And I've always had trouble getting into more westernized Cape comics, because as a kid walking into a comic store, it's very intimidating to find out what story is what. So I delved into Rumiko Takahashi and Shu Does Inuyasha and Ranma 1/2, and then rolled right into like Inuyasha and Rurouni Kenshin, and then of course there was the Naruto boom that happened. And then I guess my biggest influence is probably Clamp.
Oh, okay.
Just because they tended to focus on really angsty, more feminine stories. So I would be able to get like Magic Knight Rayearth was probably my favorite comic book series, which also happened to be Magical Girls. So that kind of exploded the whole thing. Even though I had watched Sailor Moon beforehand, it was like, oh, Sailor Moon with swords. I love this.
Oh, it's all good stuff, that's for sure. It's interesting how the Western, as you said, Western comics didn't really pick up on that until just recently. I think it's a phenomenon that's been coming from sort of overseas, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, I mean, I think like all publishers have to kind of adapt to their market, and Western comics had a really weird political thing that it had to grow out of, with like the comic censorship board and that kind of stuff. So like, I think they just kind of had a very niche market, and it wasn't until like manga kind of looked legitimate enough in places like Chapters or Barnes and Noble that it was suddenly like, oh, maybe we have a new distribution market for some full trade paperbacks. So, and then I was able to catch up on a lot of old comics I missed out on when they started being sold as omnibuses. So
Right, exactly.
yeah.
Very good. Well, we're here talking about the Toronto Comic Arts Festival. So, in that vein, I'm wondering if you have any favorite convention or festival moments.
I mean, TCAF is probably where I've had the most, just because it's where I've gotten to meet a lot of people who I haven't been able to meet outside of the online space. And I'm fairly up north, so even Toronto is quite a bit of a drive to get to on a regular basis. So yeah, it's nice just to meet everyone there. King Con in Kingston was a really fun convention that I used to go to when I lived in Kingston. Of course, though, I didn't find out all the comic artists who lived there until I moved. But being able to like face to face with people who are a little more outside of Toronto, got to talk to Kat Verhoeven and who else was there? Oh, the crew Cartridge from Ghost Junk Sickness, who do a webcomic. So just being able to like connect with them and get like more people into comics has always been really fun.
That's cool. That's cool. So we're here talking about your latest project, 12 of Magic and Muses, and I want to congratulate you on being nominated for the Sequential Magazine Award. So that's great.
Yes, thank you. That was a surprise, so I was happy that I was able to get in and I guess walk away with third place.
Hey,
and then
that's great company though, that's for sure.
No, I mean compared to the competition, I was just like, oh, I'm nice. I'm here. This is quite great.
So I wonder if you could talk a bit about that book and maybe the origins of it as well.
Yeah, sure. So I've actually been working 8 years on this massive, what ended up being a trilogy webcomic. And I update it 6 days a week. It's about Willow, who's a bespeckled, scatterbrained protagonist who is trying to help her friend's bullying problem. And in the process, she gets a magic necklace. But unlike a lot of magical fantasy stories, nobody tells her how to use it. So her familiar doesn't talk. No one can tell her how to read the book. You know, she has no instructions, but she has magic. And most of the problems that arise from that, especially in a more militarized, almost Catholic-like school, or boarding school. So she starts having infectious magical powers. So without meaning to, she's suddenly able to like give more of her classmates magical powers, but again, she doesn't have a reason to use it. There's no monster of the week. It's just this slow conspiracy that her and her friends begin to unravel.
Very intriguing, that's for sure. That's for
Thank
sure.
you.
So do you have it all planned out, or is it something that just comes to you and you continue the story?
I'm kind of working on every part of it at once. So I started out with a very rough outline, and then I would start jumping back and forth, but my main goal was to just keep going with the story and finish it, no matter how bad it was, because this is my first big comic project. So 1,000 pages later,
Wow,
I finished the first series.
That's great.
Yeah, but in that process, I also started working on a second series, which has a time skip, and the main characters are allowed to grow up and you get to see a lot more of their world. So while the first series, which just finished, focuses a lot more on like the tight character development, the second series goes much more into world building and what it actually is for and outside of the school and all that other kind of stuff.
Very good. Good stuff. So I want to switch gears slightly and talk about the tools that you use. I presume that you're more of a digital artist than traditional?
Yeah, so I actually have a weird tick where the sound of pencil on paper actually it just irritates me to no end. So I ended up going fully digital just because of that. And for me, it's just grew up in animation, so just being able to get everything done quickly very much works for my schedule. Especially since my spouse's job has us moving around a lot, so it's
Okay.
less to drag around with me.
Sure. So what technology do you use actually to create your art?
I mostly use Clip Studio Paint right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very, very good and inexpensive drawing software, which I highly recommend to a lot of artists, even if you use Photoshop, because it is more of a drawing focused tool. So like out of the box, it's so much easier to get like pen pressure and all that other kind of stuff. And then for digital effect work, I move into Photoshop and do lettering in Photoshop and that kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah. So I kind of go back and forth just to deal with the strengths of the two programs. But if you can avoid paying a lot of money for Adobe, then I highly recommend it. But
Sure.
my day job won't let me. So
Yeah. What is your drawing tool then?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Are you using like a separate scanning device, a separate drawing device?
Oh no. So I just have a Wacom mobile tablet that I use right now. Mostly just because it's mobile, so I can take it everywhere.
Sure.
It would be the equivalent of the drawing iPad that's out right now. But for more of a professional sense, just because it has like much different specs.
Right. No, that's good. So I'm wondering if you have any advice for someone who would come up to you and says, "How do I make my own comic book?" What would you say to them?
So what makes you want to draw a comic book? Like, what is the story that you want to tell? And make it as bad as you want it to be. Mostly because there's a lot of like people like to get into the fine details and the tech wear about comics when really just anything that keeps you drawing is and telling stories is what you need to do, which can ask a lot more than you think it does, because sometimes you just don't want to open that tablet. But like an hour a day drawing comics, you'll get something.
Yeah, that's sort of like what Stephen King says. He dedicates certain hours a day. He says he knows he's going to sit down and do something. It doesn't matter what, but he dedicates a couple hours a day and gets right to it.
Yeah. I like, honestly, my biggest advice is just, even when it's terrible, just keep writing. Like if it's bad, just bite your lip and get to the end of it, because as far as I have experience with, I can do more editing work that's already done and making it better than continually writing off of a blank page. So
Okay, good advice for sure. So you've been talking about 12 of Magic and Muses. I'm wondering, do you have time for anything else? Is there something else that you're working on?
So I tend to kind of blend my projects so that as one starts to finish off, like around the halfway point, the second series works in. So, for instance, I did my first series in 8 years, but at year 4 is when I started working on the second series. So I've already been working on the second series for like 5 years, I think, at this point.
Wow.
And I'm already writing series 3, which will conclude 12's whole story. But I've started the bare bones and skeletons of a few other stories, but they don't have any like thing other than a beginning and an end.
All right. Very good. So we talked about the Toronto Comic Arts Festival being a place to meet and network, but it's also a place to buy books. I'm wondering, where do you recommend people go to buy your books?
So they can actually grab my books from any of their favorite online retailers. I do have my own website, which is also where my webcomic is, which will let you read most of the story for free, at xiicomic.com. The webcomic currently updates at 6 times a week. So there's always new content, but the print editions are ahead of the webcomic by about a whole book. So if you want to purchase them and read ahead, you can do so at my store, or you can get them from Barnes & Noble or Indigo, or I think Waterstones. Should be coming to Amazon if it's not on Amazon yet. So they're pretty much available at any really big online retailer. They're just not available in store.
Very good, very good. And I was looking at your bio. You're part of the Spider Forest Comic Collective. I'm going to be interviewing them in a little while, but just wondering, I could ask you a bit about them.
Yeah, sure. So we're a comic collective. We're not really considered a publisher or a business. We're just a group of volunteers that get together and try to network our skills to help each other out, basically. So, there's probably about 200 and something members currently.
Wow.
Yeah, we usually hold an application season once a year. We get a few comics in, and we just network like manufacturers and printing specs and give each other advice, and somebody else might be stronger in coding than somebody else might be stronger in adverts, and then you can like swap stuff. We've done a few small projects like anthologies that we've kickstarted together as a group, so that was pretty fun.
Cool. Well, Kristen, those are all the questions I have for you, but I'm wondering if there's something I didn't ask that you'd like to get across in this interview.
If you like magical girls who are a little rough around the edges, I totally appreciate you checking out my magical girls. And if not my magical girls, you can find other webcomics like Kate Blast. I'm losing my mind. Agents of the Realm, Sleepless Domain. There's a whole plethora of magical girl comicers out there who are making more content, and I think everyone should read them.
Thanks to Kristen for the chat. You can discover more about Kristen on Twitter at BATICHI Kristen. And you can discover more about 12 of Magic and Muses online at xiicomic.com. And thanks to you for listening to the True North Country Comics podcast. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to and like this podcast on Apple Podcasts. And please leave a good rating. Also check out the TrueNorthCountryComics.com website and follow along on Twitter at True North Comics. True North Country Comics is now on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to that video channel. Please send your feedback to John at TrueNorthCountryComics.com. Thanks again for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics Podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2021.